some of the clock. And he fires. Yes!
Olympic gold medalist, a 4-time scoring champion, a 7-time All-Star, an MVP of the league, Kevin Durant.
LeBron James joining the 76ers. Philly will be the 5th team in the last 50 seasons to enter with 4 players that average 20 points per game.
Feel like they're contenders?
For sure. You don't think so?
No, I'm just asking you.
Last time they put 3 20-point scores on the team, they said it was unfair, which is the team I was on. Yeah. They got 4 25-point scores.
Well, the biggest difference is that Philadelphia isn't entering this situation after a season where they shattered the regular season win record and then captured an NBA championship. The Warriors were, and he's going to spend the rest of his life explaining and defending what a lot of people consider one of the weakest moves ever made in sports. That's the decision he chose, and now he has to live with it. When you look at most superstar athletes, along with major celebrities, we're seeing more and more evidence that these people are surrounded by yes men who constantly tell them what they want to hear. Whether it's during podcast appearances or even random interviews on the street, they regularly make themselves look foolish with ridiculous comments that come across as completely out of touch. A perfect example is someone like Kevin Durant comparing what he did in 2016 to LeBron James' move in 2026. If you examine both decisions by themselves, sure, you could argue that they were both attempts to chase another championship. But when you compare the circumstances and the level of ring chasing involved, what happened in 2016 is easily one of the most extreme examples I've ever seen.
Last time they put 3 20-point scores on the team, they said it was unfair, which is the team I was on. Yeah. They got 4 25-point scores on this team.
When someone like KD makes comments like these, you have to ask yourself, is he trolling? Is he actually serious? Or has he completely lost touch with how fans view him and his overall legacy? If you asked me, I'd say Kevin Durant has been surrounded by yes men who constantly tell him what he wants to hear, because his comments reflect that perfectly. In 2016, Durant joined the Warriors. To many people, it remains one of the most spineless and cowardly moves in NBA history.
Kevin Durant, you're one of the top 3 players in the world. Your teammate is one of the top 5 players in the world. And you leave to go to the team.
And once again, just look at that comparison. The 2027 Sixers versus the 2017 Golden State Warriors. Sure, both teams are loaded with talent, but there are clearly different levels to this. Durant joining Golden State came right after what? He had a 3-1 lead and then lost to that same Warriors team in the Western Conference Finals. Now compare that with LeBron going to Philadelphia. There's no real rivalry there, no deep history between LeBron James and Philadelphia, and that city had never been standing in his way of winning championships. There's also a major difference when you look at where each player was in his career. In 2016, what was Durant still missing? A championship. He had spent 9 years in Oklahoma City without winning one. LeBron, meanwhile, already had 4 championships after more than 2 decades in the league. Is LeBron chasing another ring? Absolutely. But at 41 years old, he's nowhere near as desperate as Kevin Durant was in 2016, when Durant had 0 championships and was right in the middle of his prime. And that's another huge part of the comparison. Durant was 28 years old in 2016 and entering the peak of his powers. LeBron is now 41. Then look at the supporting cast Golden State had around Durant. Draymond Green was in his prime, a second-team All-NBA player and borderline Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Klay Thompson was also an elite NBA player, one of the league's greatest shooters and a lockdown defender. And then, of course, there was Steph Curry, an MVP, scoring champion, and arguably the best guard in basketball at that time. As talented as players like Tyrese Maxey, Jaylen Brown, and Joel Embiid can be when healthy, they simply don't compare to that Warriors group. And there's another massive detail people overlook. That Warriors core had already proven everything before Kevin Durant arrived. Draymond, Klay, and Curry were known commodities. They had already shown they could win championships. The trio of Maxey, Brown, and Embiid has accomplished nothing together. And once you add Jaylen Brown to the equation, those 4 players have played 0 games together on an NBA court. So Philadelphia is still completely TBD. But Golden State in 2017? We already knew exactly what that team was and what it could accomplish, even before Kevin Durant joined them.
All right, so this team got 4 25-point scores.
I think to understand this statement, though, you also have to understand the way KD view basketball. And the way KD view basketball is very Uncle Drewish. But that is how KD see the game. So he's going to mention to 25-point scorers. And I think everybody look at that and be like, oh man, that team is nothing like that team was. Like, I don't think he ever said that. Last time they put 3 20-point scorers on the team, they said it was unfair, which is the team I was on. Yeah. They got 4 25-point scorers on this team.
Now, let's stop right there for a second and focus on what Draymond said about Kevin Durant's mindset and what he actually values. According to that description, it basically comes down to one thing: getting a bucket and not much else. And when you look at Durant's career as a whole, that assessment does seem to line up. As a passer, ball handler, and even as a rebounder, his production has often been fairly average by superstar standards. As a scorer, though, 10 out of 10. But honestly, that's where the argument begins and ends. He's an incredible offensive weapon, but that doesn't automatically make him a great all-around player. If pure scoring and isolation buckets are the only things you value, then I guess Philadelphia does look like the better team on paper. Brown, Maxey, and Embiid were all among the NBA's top isolation scorers last year. In a vacuum, those guys absolutely represent a team capable of getting buckets and putting points on the board whenever they want. But basketball is about much more than one player simply putting the ball through the hoop. Draymond Green isn't known for being a bucket getter, yet he remains extremely valuable. Klay Thompson can create his own offense, but usually within 1 or 2 dribbles. He's primarily a spot-up shooter and has always fit naturally into a team-first system. Even Steph Curry, who can absolutely score one-on-one whenever he wants, is incredibly unselfish and operates within the team's offense. And when you look at Durant's career after Golden State, prioritizing scoring above everything else has burned him repeatedly. Go back to Brooklyn in 2021. You had James Harden, who the previous year averaged 34 points per game with the Nets. Kyrie Irving was at 27.4, while Durant was around 26.9. That gave you 3 elite scorers, with all 3 among the league's top 10, and some people would even argue they were all top 5 offensive players. So what happened when the postseason arrived? That team fell apart, stumbled badly, and ultimately became a massive disappointment. Then fast forward 2 years, and Durant essentially repeated the same formula in Phoenix. Look at that roster again. 3 elite bucket getters who ultimately failed to deliver when the postseason arrived. You had Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, with all 3 entering that situation as 20-plus point scorers. The problem is, it still wasn't enough. Now compare that with Philadelphia. Joel Embiid has won an MVP. Jaylen Brown is a recent Finals MVP. Tyrese Maxey has been an all-star over the last few seasons. We know what LeBron does at this stage of his career. Klay Thompson was never an MVP candidate, but he was still a 20-plus point scorer and an elite shooter. Draymond was putting up roughly 14 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists while providing enormous value outside of scoring. And Steph Curry was an MVP, just like Joel Embiid. So I honestly don't understand how anyone could look at those 2 rosters and confidently say the Warriors were clearly better on paper. That argument makes no sense to me. Now, let's stop right there again and look at Durant's Instagram comments. Is he trolling or is he actually serious? Because when you read through those comments, he sounds extremely defensive, but at the same time, everyone knows Durant has a history of trolling people online. If he's simply messing around, then fair enough. You got everybody talking. But if he genuinely believes this comparison, that's honestly much more concerning. Look at the comparison itself. It leaves out an enormous amount of context, and that's the problem. You can't just throw out 2 statements and pretend the circumstances were identical. Take those comments about Joel Embiid being an MVP and Steph Curry also being an MVP. Technically, yes, both men are MVPs. But that doesn't make their situations remotely identical. That comparison is basically apples to pizza. Over the previous 3 years, Joel Embiid had won an MVP, but afterward came 0 additional MVPs, 1 All-Star appearance, 0 championships, around 150 games missed, and only 1 playoff series victory during that stretch. And remember, he was 29, 30, and 31 during that period, while dealing with repeated injuries that took a serious toll on his prime and kept him from consistently being himself. Now compare that with Steph before Durant arrived. During those 3 seasons, Steph had 2 MVP awards, 1 championship, just 9 missed games, and 7 playoff series victories. Steph was also right in the middle of his prime, playing those seasons at age 25, 26, and 27. So when you look at both players, are they technically both MVPs? Of course they are. But once you add the most basic context and common sense, the situations are completely different. Steph was in his prime and consistently available. Embiid has struggled to stay healthy and hasn't been operating at that same MVP level consistently for quite some time. It really isn't complicated.
And that pretty much brings us to the end of the video. But I want to make one final point about Kevin Durant's overall legacy. Durant should have been viewed as a top 10 player ever and, depending on your argument, potentially one of the greatest scorers to ever play the game. In reality, though, what we keep seeing is a player who trolls online and possesses incredible individual talent, especially when he's working out or playing one-on-one. There's an argument that his pure skill is among the greatest we've ever seen, but Durant's biggest weakness is almost the complete opposite of Steph Curry's greatest strength. I'm talking about elevating teams, being a great teammate, developing chemistry, and making sure that chemistry doesn't fall apart. Durant's intangibles have always been a major question mark, and these comments only make that criticism easier for people to understand. The lack of common sense in comparing Steph Curry and Joel Embiid simply because they are both MVPs is already a huge stretch. But then comes the real cherry on top, Durant suggesting that his 2016 decision was basically equal to LeBron James joining Philadelphia in 2026. Like I said at the very beginning, when it comes to how much ring chasing was involved, Durant joining the Warriors in 2016 was an 11 out of 10. LeBron going to Miami was a 9 out of 10. LeBron going to Philadelphia? I'd put that somewhere around a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. Are all of those moves examples of chasing another championship? Absolutely. But look at Durant's decision specifically. Joining the Warriors after losing to them, after having a 3-1 lead in the Western Conference Finals, remains one of the most controversial moves in NBA history. And regardless of how the rest of his career plays out, that decision is always going to be a major part of his legacy. As always, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.